We often hear about the ideal of a sustainable place, but what does that actually look like on the ground, especially somewhere complex like a mountain region?
That's a great question. It really demands a closer look, doesn't it? And today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're diving deep into this really interesting study.
Right.
It looked at sustainability in two northern Italian Alpine provinces, Belluno and Bolzano.
Exactly. And for you listening, we know you want to really get a handle on important stuff without getting, totally bogged down in detail.
Yeah.
So we've got this detailed research, and our mission, basically, is to pull out the key insights. What makes these alpine areas tick, sustainably speaking?
And the researchers weren't just like looking at the views. They were digging into socio-demographics, the environment, economics, even how easy it is to get places accessibility.
All aimed at creating something useful for local decision makers.
Precisely. And it's crucial to remember that just defining sustainability is tricky. I mean, there are literally hundreds of definitions floating around.
Wow, hundreds.
Yeah. So this study kind of acknowledges that, references the 92 UN conference, which really stressed needing a joined-up approach, especially for mountain areas.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. It's not just about being green, is it? The study talks about the triple bottom line.
Exactly, Elkington's idea, that social, economic, and environmental aspects are all linked. You can't really separate them.
Right. They feed into each other.
Precisely. And this study, it zeroes in on territorial sustainability. So how those three things, plus accessibility, play out together in these specific places.
And they're looking at it from the ground up.
Yeah, that's key, a bottom-up approach, where the local reality shapes the policies. The aim is to give local leaders the evidence they need for, tailored solutions.
Okay, so let's zoom in. Belluno and Bolzano. Tell us about them.
Okay, so geographically, we're talking Netti's three-level provinces. They're basically administrative regions, mostly rural, tucked away in the Alps near Austria.
Mentius 3. Got it.
And they share some things, definitely. The Dolomites World Heritage Site runs through both. Generally, they've got high GDP per capita, often rank well for quality of life in Italy.
Sounds pretty good. But you said they're different, too. The study points that out.
Yeah, scratch the surface and you see it. Belluno's got some areas struggling with depopulation. Both face challenges like farming is tough there, high-cost, aging farmers.
Okay.
But the deeper differences are quite stark. Bolzano, for instance, is an autonomous province. Meaning it has a lot of legislative power, health, education, transport, you name it. It's also mostly German-speaking.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, higher population density, too, and more foreign citizens, maybe around 9%. Tourism is huge there, leads Italy in overnight stays. Plus, they're big on fruit production and renewables.
And Belluno, how does it compare?
It's actually bigger geographically, but has fewer people, lower density. The percentage of foreign citizens is lower, too, about 6%, and it's been going down. There's even some sort of social unease about the border, with Bolzano referendums about joining them.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Economically, tourism matters, but there's also this big eyewear production cluster, though job growth there has slowed down a bit. Agriculture, less vital economically, but still important for the environment. Biodiversity.
Okay, so two distinct alpine areas. Now, the method they use, dominance-based rift set approach, DRSA. Sounds a bit intense.
It does. But the reason they chose it is actually pretty cool. It's more objective. Instead of researchers deciding how important each factor is, subjectively weighting things.
Right, which can introduce bias.
Exactly. This method, DRSA, it helps find clear rules. Like which conditions most strongly lead to certain outcomes, the things we're trying to understand.
So the rules are like, if you have conditions A, B, and C, then you're likely to get outcome X.
Pretty much, yeah. If conditions, then decision. And in this study, the decisions or outcomes were two things.
Okay, what were they?
First, the number of foreign citizens in a town. They saw that as a sign of economic attractiveness. People move for opportunities, right?
Makes sense.
And second, population variation over 5 years.
Yeah.
Just are people moving in or out? Another kind of general measure of how appealing a place is.
Gotcha. So what conditions lead to more foreign citizens or population growth? That's what they were trying to figure out.
Exactly. And interestingly, these two measures, foreign citizens and population change, didn't always point the same way. A town could rank high on one and low on the other.
Huh. So it shows sustainability or attractiveness is complicated, not just one thing.
Absolutely. Really highlights that multifaceted nature.
Okay, so DRSA, crunching the numbers, looking at those two outcomes, what were the big takeaways? What factors really mattered?
Well, they found a lot of rules, over 2,100.
Whoa!
Yeah. Looking at the socio-demographic stuff, things like average age and birth rate, they showed up a lot in rules for population change.
Which kind of makes intuitive sense. Younger population, more births, likely more growth.
Right. School dropout rates also appeared in some rules for both outcomes. And the number of local associations seemed important too, like a lack of them might signal social issues.
Okay. What about environmental things? Landslide risk, stuff like that. You'd think that'd be huge in the Alps.
You would think.
What?
But interestingly, those natural risk indicators, they didn't feature very strongly in the decision rules.
Really? That's surprising.
It is. It seems people's decisions about where to live weren't heavily driven by those specific risks, at least in this analysis. Maybe other things just outweigh them, or maybe it's factored in differently.
Okay, what about the economy?
Right, economic indicators. The tourism rate showed a really noticeable difference between the two provinces.
You mentioned Bolzano was strong there.
Very strong. It seems Bolzano is exploiting tourism much more effectively than Belluno. It really highlights how tourism can drive sustainable economic development in rural spots. They mentioned Cyprus as another example.
So potential for Belluno to do more there, perhaps.
Seems like it, yeah. Untapped potential, maybe.
And the last category, accessibility. Crucial in the mountains, I imagine.
Absolutely critical. And the data backs that up. Distance to the closest school came up frequently.
Which raises issues about education access, right?
Yeah.
Trade-offs, maybe, between school and work.
Exactly. And the researchers link that back to broader ideas about education boosting GDP growth. Also, distance to the train station that was big for the number of foreign citizens.
Okay.
And distance to the motorway mattered more for population variation overall. It just underlines how vital transport links are. And again, there's a difference in how well-served Bolzano and Belluno are network-wise.
So it's not just about these factors alone, but how they connect. Did the study look at those interactions?
Yes, and that's where it gets really insightful. They analyze the links between the dimensions socio-demographic, environmental, economic, accessibility within those rules.
Yeah.
Socio-demographic factors had the most links to others. Accessibility also had a lot of interactions, especially, as you might expect, relating to the number of foreign citizens. And these interactions were more common in smaller towns, under 5,000 people, and also when looking at the whole area together.
Were the interactions different between Belluno and Bolzano?
Big difference, actually. Belluno showed quite limited interactions between the dimensions. Bolzano, on the other hand, had many more, and they were more evenly spread out.
What does that suggest?
Well, the researchers think this might mean Bolzano is sort of closer to achieving sustainability because these different aspects are working together more. They're more integrated.
Right.
But here's a really crucial point, maybe the key takeaway on interactions. They found very low interaction between economic and environmental factors.
Wow, even there.
Even there. Across both provinces, all sizes of towns, it just hammers home that classic tension, doesn't it? Economic growth versus environmental protection. It seems even in these high quality of life areas that conflict persists.
That really makes you think, yeah. Are economic models just fundamentally incompatible with environmental health?
It's a persistent question, and this study adds more evidence to that side of the ledger.
Okay, so pulling it all together, what are the main conclusions from this whole deep dive into Belluno and Bolzano?
Well, first off, it confirms these Alpine areas are complex for sustainability. Just look at all those rules they found.
Right, the 2100 plus rules.
Exactly. It also showed accessibility seems more key for attracting foreign citizens, specifically, and that mid-sized towns had the most complex interactions going on.
And the differences between the two provinces were stark.
Very stark, especially on tourism and how interconnected those sustainability dimensions are. Bolzano seems more integrated.
So what's the big picture on sustainability in these places that, look pretty idyllic from the outside?
The study really underscores that progress in one area, say, the economy doesn't automatically mean progress elsewhere, like the environment. High quality of life doesn't equal holistic sustainability.
Right.
Bolzano's higher level of interaction suggests it might be closer to a more integrated sustainability. And the fact that socio-demographics and accessibility kept popping up in the rules really highlights their importance.
So what should policymakers take away?
The researchers suggest focusing on why some indicators don't seem to matter much in people's decisions and looking for those unexploited opportunities, like maybe tourism in Belluno.
And Bolzano's autonomy, that seemed important too.
Definitely. The researchers think its greater autonomy and, frankly, financial resources likely help it pursue more integrated policies.
Makes sense.
They also mentioned that border issue in Belluno, the variable geometry, and how looking at both provinces together actually strengthened the interactions they saw. So cooperation might be key.
So the study gives a way to see common factors, but also what's unique locally.
Exactly. Identifying common and diverse rules at different levels, that's valuable.
Any thoughts on where research goes next or limitations?
Yeah, they suggested looking at different outcomes, maybe more specific economic or environmental measures. Comparing with totally different areas, maybe using other methods too. They acknowledge data gaps, of course, like local greenhouse gas emissions or GDP per capita, hard data to get sometimes. And they stress that choosing indicators is always tough. They need to be policy relevant, measurable, sound.
Makes sense.
And they finish by saying, look, this bottom-up analysis, based on what people actually do, it's crucial. But you still need a top-down strategic vision for sustainability overall.
So you need both.
You absolutely need both working together.
Okay, so the big takeaway seems to be achieving real sustainability, especially somewhere complex like the Alps, isn't about one silver bullet. It's about really understanding how all of these pieces, social, economic, environmental, accessibility, fit together or don't, and tailoring what you do to the local reality.
Exactly. And that stubborn, weak link between economic drivers and environmental health, that remains a huge challenge we really need to keep tackling with fresh thinking.
Fascinating stuff. So for you, our listener, thinking about all this, what do you see as the biggest hurdles to real sustainability where you live, in your community or region? And how can local actions and those bigger policies actually work together to overcome them? Really mull over how connected those social, economic, environmental, and accessibility factors are in your world. It's a complex puzzle, isn't it? And your perspective is definitely a vital piece.